law enforcement agencies the tools needed to resolve crimes perpetrated with the use of these SIM cards, as well as providing a strong deterrence against the commission of wrongdoing.
Mobile phone users will now be required to register their SIM cards after President Marcos signed the SIM registration law.
Bilang na raw ang araw ng mga scammer ngayong ganap ng batas ang mandatory na pagpaparehistro ng SIM.
May babala rin si Pangulong Bongbong Marcos laban sa mga gumagamit ng peking identity at iba pa mga impormasyon.
The use of false or fictitious information, the use of fictitious identities, the use of fraudulent documents or identifications to register a SIM card shall also be dealt with by appropriate penalties.
The SIM Registration Act is now law. What now? While we wait for implementing rules and regulations, how are government and telecommunications companies preparing? What can mobile users expect in their registration process? And is the law a foolproof way to end scams and spam? The answers in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to The Chiefs. Ako po si Roby Alampay. Kasama po natin sa studio Ed Lingao of One News. We're both here in Mandaluyong. Joining us online from Manila, Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star. And mamaya po sasamahan din tayo ni Luchi Cruz-Valdes of News 5. Chiefs, happy Tuesday.
Good evening.
Happy Tuesday.
Ami, anong binabantayan natin?
Mukhang na blacklist yata tayo ng Beijing for their tourists. Marami-rami din yon. 2 million din yon na nakaraang taon yata eh. No, before the pandemic, I mean. And inaasahan sana natin tataas. Although we need official confirmation pa, no? Si Mig Subiri yung sabi niyan.
Kanina sinasabi ni Senator Win Gatchalian, parang warning pa lang. It's not yet a final move, but although yan din yung pinag-uusapan din natin kanina with Senator Mig Subiri. O kasama na pala natin si Luchi. Luchi.
Hello, good evening. Pinag-uusapan ng mga POGO
Oo nga.
Blacklisted. Wow. Okay, ano kaya ang gagawin dyan, ano? Dahil ang dami ring affected pala, no? Ang dami ring workers na mawawalan talaga ng hanap buhay pagka rin malaking desisyon.
Pero yun nga, sinasabi kanina ni Senator Mig Subiri. On the other hand, if you take into account, alam naman natin yung debates on either side, di ba? Yung employment, revenues from POGOs and so on, taxes, there's argument on either side of that as well. But at the same time, yung costs to society, social ills no less than China saying mga sindikato, yung mga nandyan, hindi namin mag-guarantee yung protection for ano. So even Senator Mig Subiri was saying that this has to again add to our calculations on the cost benefit analysis ika nga ng POGO industry as a whole.
Yeah.
Pati nga daw mga investor na turn off dyan sa mga gulo associated with POGOs Matagal na posisyon na ng Beijing They've been asking the Duterte administration for a long time, di ba? They issued a very long statement condemning POGOs. Tingnan natin kung ano mangyari.
But the other news of interest is yung Pulse Asia survey. But no surprise dun sa headline na number na 9 out of 10 Filipinos think fake news is a problem. That's not a surprise. It's not even news. Yung news is
yung news.
Statistically tied ang television at ang internet as source of fake news. 68 versus 67. That's a statistical tie. And journalists are number 2 according to the public perception as a source of fake news. 58% ata yung social media influencers and vloggers, tapos ang mga journal number 2 is 40%.
Pero tama ba yung nakita ko? I think I recall something about newspapers. Newspapers,
3%.
Reliable.
3%.
Kasi baka ilan nung nakapabasa.
Exactly. Reliable pa sana. Kaunti The problem is, di ba, yung also the struggles of the newspaper industry, vis-a-vis, in the meantime, people are getting their news from sources that apparently they do not trust.
Yes, yun talaga ng source.
And then at the same
Lalo na
time,
sa mga kabataan, di ba?
At the same time, on the other hand, while Filipinos recognize that fake news is a problem in the Philippines, 9 out of 10, they appear to be very confident that they can identify fake news versus real news. 54% think that Filipinos can tell what is fake news and what is not.
Which runs up counter totally against what studies, surveys, and our own assessment of our students actually show. That the majority of our students actually cannot tell the difference between a statement of fact and a statement
Daming studies yan sa
and opinion.
karamihan kasi studies sa US eh. Ang daming studies sa US ha. Majority of primary secondary students cannot tell the difference between a sponsored ad and a news report.
Kasama yan dun sa kasama yan sa PISA assessment natin eh, 'di ba? That's what sa reading comprehension, that's one of the things that they look at. And then here's this one other item. The Court of Appeals has denied Maria Reza's motion for reconsideration over her cyber libel case. That's something that we will have to, of course, monitor as well for its ramifications as well for how we perceive the state of the press here in the country. Obviously, lots to discuss there, lots to monitor. In the meantime, we will speak to our first guest after a short break. Please keep it right here on One News.
Good evening po, Secretary. Pa-open na po ng
Welcome back, the Chiefs. What do we need to know about the first law signed under the Marcos administration? Here to talk about the SIM Card Registration Act is DICT Secretary Ivan Uy. Secretary Uy, thank you for being with us tonight.
Good
Magandang
evening.
gabi, sir.
Sir, yun na 2%.
Secretary Uy,
Baka naubos na yung baterya. Off cam kasi sinasabi nila, talaga, 3% na lang daw yung charge ng
Inabutan namin
baterya.
2%.
okay,
Well, unfortunately,
may technical problems po tayo kay Secretary Uy.
Our technology secretary.
Nothing to do with the SIM card, apparently. Something to do with the battery. So kahit pa magpa-register ka, hindi mo masosolve yung problema mo kung lobat ka.
Sabi niya, hindi yan technology problem. It's an energy problem.
But anyway, what do we know about the SIM card registration act? Remember, this is the same law that was vetoed by President Duterte.
Yes.
One of his final acts was to veto it. They vetoed it because may nag-insert, may rider na pati yung social media accounts mo kailangan mo i-register. That essentially was what was vetoed by President Duterte. And then dahil tinanggal yun, that's what made this law easier to pass.
Yeah.
Well, in the first place, napakahirap. Ngayon pa lang, naghihirap na sila kung paano i-implement yan eh. Kung isasama mo pa yung social media.
Social media.
Diba? The logistics of registering, it's not that simple.
Yeah. But that's the logistics and the operations and the practicalities of it. But of course, the objective of this is supposedly for the security of everybody. People are concerned about privacy. Those are the kinds of questions that we also need to clarify. But they're saying, yung mga scam, mga spam, pati yung mga pwede nating makontrol yan. Mukhang kasama na natin yan. Subukan natin ulit. DICT Secretary Ivan Uy. Secretary Uy, are you with us?
Yes. Go ahead.
There you go.
Paparamdam sana ako eh.
Are you with us?
Welcome to the Chiefs.
Undas.
Naka-plug in na po kayo.
Wala pa rin, pero we still have 3%. I think we should cover it in a few minutes.
Sige, bilisan na lang po natin bago
Shoot the questions po.
Ano po yung i-open-ended natin para mapasok nyo lahat. Ano pong implication nito for the consumers, first of all?
Well, the consumers will now be assured with better protection from scams and unwanted text or spams. Dahil identifiable na ngayon yung mga SIM cards that are being used to do this. So this will improve law enforcement against criminal activity using the SIM cards. So that's the protection that the public can benefit from this law.
Sir,
Pero,
but is there...
Secretary, yung mga telecommunications companies, humihingi silang more time. Kasi malaki role nila for the registration, They're asking for more time dahil yung daw verification, kung maaari daw, merong specific proposal in fact na gamitin daw yung national ID for validation, kaso hindi pa daw kumpleto yung national ID. Kung pwede daw na full rollout muna ng national ID.
Matagal pa yung national ID dahil hindi ata sila makahabol sa printing nun. We have to ask the Philippine Statistics Authority what's going on, no? Very, very long overdue na yan. Ngunit, as of now po, marami namang ways to verify the identification. Your passport, your driver's license. Katulad ng whenever you open a online payment with either GCash or PayMaya, they verify you naman eh. They ask for your details and then they ask you to upload your passport or your driver's license. And the government or the Globe or Smart or Dito can verify with DFA, with LTO, whether those licenses or passports are genuine or not. So
Pero
they
sir,
don't have to wait for the national
Yes, sir.
ID. Additionally po, it's not really that complicated because they're already doing it for all postpaid accounts.
Yes, sir.
So it's just a matter of expanding it to include prepaid.
Yes,
So
sir.
the system is the same. Except that it's the scale that's different because we only have about 4 million postpaid accounts versus 144 million prepaid cards that are issued. So the scale is different. But in terms of systems, I don't think there's really much that needs to be changed.
Pero sir, let me get down into the weeds. For example, kasi sa postpaid, typically you apply for a postpaid line in person, you give your ID in person, they photocopy it, and so on down the line. So in other words, there's person-to-person, face-to-face checking versus,
Yes.
for example, 144 million prepaid subscribers who will be uploading, for example, a photocopy or a scanned copy of whatever national ID or whatever ID they have na pwedeng photoshop, ginawa sa recto, or what? Na hindi pwedeng salatin, hindi pwedeng hawakan, hindi pwedeng iperus ng mag-check. And you're looking at 144 million, sabi nga ninyo, it's also a matter of scale. So medyo mas
That's
limot.
correct. That's correct, Ed. The issue really is how to scale it quickly. So there will be a need, no, for more time to be able to verify whether the scanned copy or the photoed copy of whatever identification that's posted is actually a genuine document, or as you said nga, ginawa sa recto. And that's going to take a little more time.
Sir, paano, this has been done in many other countries, no? And many of them have proven also that registration of SIM cards doesn't really help to prevent crime, no? And according to the experts, really, kahit na nakaregister ang mga SIM cards, marami pa ring ibang paraan. Halimbawa, to conduct phishing. Bad actors can simply use foreign numbers, email platforms, and other mobile applications. So, pwedeng, kumbaga, they can get around the registration.
Yes.
Paano nyo masisiguro na ito talaga ang sagot sa problema natin sa scammers?
Luchi, it's not a magic potion where it solves everything. It's the objective of the law really is just to remove one avenue of criminal exploitation of a particular technology. Criminals will always find other ways to circumvent and other ways to do it. The argument would be the same as, let's say, alam naman natin na maglagay tayo ng steel bar, pwede naman nila lagariin yung steel bar, makakapasok pa rin ng tao. Ang magnanakaw, ibig pa sabihin, hindi tayo maglalagay ng steel bar sa bahay. Even if, So we actually are looking for what are the avenues that the criminals are using, and we put up some form of defense in order to protect our citizens, but it's not foolproof, and it definitely will not solve all types of online crimes. They will find a way. I'm sure they will find social media. They're going to use email. They're still going to use all the other modes. But we'll have to
and the database is massive, no? We're really talking about massive database, and sobrang parang gold mine yan.
Right.
For those who really want to get that data, and you can expect that they will, make all efforts to actually get to that data. I mean, how secure can we make that data?
The data will be the responsibility of the telcos because those are their customers. And so they have to secure that information. Currently, they're securing it. All the postpaid information are being secured by them. It's the same way, no? You have bank accounts, you have ATM accounts. The banks secure your money, secure your private information, and you do online banking. So they have all the data. And in fact, they're holding your money. In this case, at least on the SIM card, perhaps there's not much money involved yet. It's mostly just information that's being held. So, but that's really how it goes, no? On this online thing. Many governments already are implementing this.
Secretary, nabanggit nyo nga po yung banking services, no? Siyempre, of course, other than protecting us against scams, people are also looking at what are the implications for services, online services that we can count on. So, I mean, a lot of these services now hinge precisely on our mobile numbers and the verification there. Does that shift the burden for know your clients, let's say in this example, from banks? And does that shift the responsibility more to the telcos? For that matter, does it completely unburden the banks and leaving the telcos basically being not only the first point of contact, but the ultimate entity responsible for knowing clients?
Actually, it's a shared responsibility because there are certain portions of the system that's with the bank and the other portion with the telcos. So, but in many instances, the telcos themselves already operate the online banking platform. You could see it, no? For instance, Globe owns GCash and PLDT owns PayMaya. So they run their own digital payments system already, the telcos.
Secretary, sabi ng telcos, they will need some time also to install the necessary infrastructure to install nga the data for the magnitude that is required, no? So
Yes.
realistically, inaayos pa yung implementing rules and regulations, hindi pa nga napapublish yung bagong batas. Realistically, when do you expect the rules to come out and the law to actually take effect? Kasi syempre, hinihintay ng mga tao. By Christmas kaya, lahat kami required na lahat ng merong SIM card required na mag-register.
Actually, ayon sa batas, the IRR should be issued within 60 days, but the law is not effective yet because it has to be published in the official gazette. And then 15 days later, tapos IRR 60 days, and if I'm not mistaken, implementations within a period of 120 days. That's 6 months.
Sir, what would you want to see? What would you want to put in the IRR that you think would be very urgent and very, very important, aside from what's already in the law?
I think the details on, let's say, protection of the privacy of the individual with respect to their information and the penalties. The penalties, I think, range from 500,000 to 4 million in case there's a breach of personal information. And at the same time, the need to get a subpoena or a warrant before any of that information can be divulged in case of there's a criminal investigation that's ongoing.
Yes, sir.
And then in the process of registering, I think it should not be a third party that captures the data. So it's not you don't provide your personal data to a sari-sari store or to a stall in Palengke just because you're buying a SIM card. I think the process should be you buy the SIM card without even having to prove any identity. But once you install the SIM card on your phone, then it brings you to the site of the telco where you have to register before it gets activated. That way, the telco has direct input or receiving the information, and the information doesn't go all over the place.
But Secretary, that's a very good point. I mean, it may seem trivial, but I can actually imagine people going to a palengke, buying a SIM card, and then sasabihan sila, ito yung maglista ka ng pangalan mo dyan, at saka I can imagine a lot of operators doing that. I mean, sa totoo lang, we do that every time we enter a building. Diba? And
Yes.
then with people's awareness of this law, they may assume it's actually reasonable na before makuha yung SIM card nila, papipirmahin muna sila, and they gave up their data that way. What is the penalty on the side of the vendors, assuming that somebody runs that kind of a scam?
Well, it will be breached, no? It will be actually a breach of the data privacy law. And there are corresponding penalties for that.
Secretary, how much of the experience from other countries has been factored into this law? For example, I'm reading some of the facts about how this was implemented in other countries like Hong Kong. No? Sa Hong Kong, halimbawa, titigil na nila yung kanilang pag-register ng mga SIM card soon because it really didn't work. Because most of the scams now actually take place sa email platform. It's not sa text, no? And then in Saudi Arabia naman, sir, nagkaroon tuloy ng black market resale of SIM cards registered to unknown buyers. In other words, di ba napapaihutan? And so ang dami raw cases ng mga SIMs na ibang identity, no, at ibang pangalan yung lumalabas. I mean, anong klaseng security, again, firewall or whatever you call it, na pwedeng i-put up to make sure that no legitimate SIM card registrant is actually put at risk in any way?
That will have to work with the telcos and the National Privacy Commission on what are the various safeguards that have to be put in place. But email scams has been there for the longest time, even without the SIM cards. No, these are what you call the Nigerian scams. Even before email, they sent snail mail, no, in the post office. So the criminals will just use every technology, every form in order to dupe the public, and so it has nothing to do really with foolproof prevention, because once you stop one avenue, they will look for another avenue to do it. But that shouldn't justify us from not even trying to help the public. All of you, everybody has been complaining about tech scams, which has been actually the favorite mode of scamming lately. And how do we respond to that if we do not actually come up with laws penalizing those kinds of activities and regulating? So in order to make it more difficult for these criminals to use those devices.
Yes, sir. Pero sir, let me ask about...
Yung napasa na yung measure na yan. The previous bill was vetoed dahil nga dun sa social media account registration. Sinabi ng mga senador, mga lawmakers at that time, they will push for a separate measure to regulate social media naman. How are you proceeding in this direction naman? Itutuloy niyo ba yan? Itutulak niyo pa rin? Naubos na yata yung 3%.
Baka prepaid si Sec.
Okay.
Wala na. Mukhang sumuko na. Buti, umabot pa. 3%. Actually, gusto kong tanongin kung anong telepono niya ngayon. Sipin nyo, tumagal yan 2%. Mahaba-habang usapan yun. And just in time, we're actually getting prepared for another break. We'll start up another conversation after the break. Thank you to Secretary Ivan Uy. For the rest of us, please stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back.
Topic in and outside Congress.
Persistent POGO issues in the country have reportedly prompted the Chinese government to place the Philippines under its tourism blacklist.
Chinese Ambassador Win Gatchalian daw ang nagsabi sa ilang senador na kasama na ang Pilipinas sa blacklisted tourist destinations ng China. Ayon yan kay Senate President Mig Zubiri.
The Ambassador Wang said that the Philippines now is part of a blacklist of tourist sites because they do not know if the tourists going there will be operating or will be joining POGO operations. And they do not know if their nationals, the Chinese nationals who go to the Philippines, will be safe from illegal activities being done by the triad, by the syndicates operating POGOs. They may also be kidnapped, mistaken for POGO operators.
Sa gitna naman ng mga panawagan na i-shutdown na ang buong industriya ng POGO sa bansa, umapila sa Senado ang grupo ng mga lehitimong POGO.
Nakakalungkot na dahil sa mga hindi magagandang pangyayari sa POGO industry ay nailalahat ang batiko sa buong POGO industry, no? But kung bibigyan natin ng pagkakataon upang makabalik muli, no, makabangon muli ang POGO industry, ay natitiyak namin sa ASPAP na mas malaki pa ang aming maitutulong sa ating gobyerno.
Offshore gaming operators or POGOs are still a hot topic in and outside of Congress. At the Senate, inquiries continue, and to tell us more about the latest developments there is Senator Win Gatchalian. He joins us via Zoom. Sir, magandang gabi and welcome back to the Chiefs.
Good morning.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening,
Good evening, sir.
Ed. Good evening, Ami, and good evening, Luchi.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, we started earlier on.
It's okay, sir. Sir, we understand you were in the meeting with the Chinese ambassador. Some clarification here. Ano ba talaga? Have we been blacklisted or not because of the POGOs? And if we have been blacklisted, what should we do about it?
Well, apparently so. Yesterday, the Chinese ambassador went to pay courtesy to the Senate President, and the Senate President invited me to join the courtesy call, and we talked about many things. One amongst was the issue of POGO, and apparently, in short, the ambassadors expressed grave concern about the operations of POGO here, because he told us that in China there were a lot of cases of suicides from gambling debts and related to online gambling. So the Chinese government is cracking down on online betting, and this includes POGO. And one of the ways of China cracking down on their citizens to participate in online gaming is to come up with a blacklist mechanism so that their tourists or their citizens who will go out as tourists will not engage in POGO or will not engage in online gaming outside of China.
So, sir, confirm na blacklisted tayo kasi there was some confusion as to whether or not it was still a threat or it's already an actual blacklist.
Ed, I cannot categorically answer you that because my appreciation, I told this earlier to the friends the media friends in the Senate. My appreciation is that the Chinese embassy or the Chinese government is imposing a blacklist. As to whether it is already imposed or will be imposed, I think that is something that the Chinese embassy should answer, because my appreciation is this is a mechanism for them to use to prevent Chinese posing as tourists and then gambling or participating in POGO outside of China. Whether that is already implemented or not, we need to get verification.
Senator, matagal nang hinihingi yan ng Beijing actually since the time of President Duterte, one of the few times na nireject ni President Duterte yung gusto ng Beijing, ano? And nag-issue na ng mahabang statement ang embassy some years ago before the pandemic about all these social ills that they are now talking about. So siguro, ang tanong ko lang, do they have to inform us kung iba blacklist nila tayo as a tourism destination? Kasi isa pang problema dyan, marami ng mga POGO workers are coming here on tourist visas as well.
From an article that I read over the internet, Ami, apparently this blacklist mechanism is quite low-key. They apparently in this article by the Diplomat, it was never publicly announced. But then again, we have to ask the DFA, we have to ask the Chinese embassy as to what extent this blacklisting is. Does it cover everyone, every Chinese citizen going out going out of China and coming to the Philippines? And how there's so many implications. Now, for example, if you're a legitimate businessman, how will this affect you? So, in other words, yes, may ganyan na mechanism. I read in the internet. I also read that it's low-key. But whether the Philippines is included, we need to get confirmation on that one.
In any case, sir, I mean, how do we do the calculations now on the benefits on one side, on the other hand, the costs? We're talking about, as of 2019, 2 million tourists from China versus tens of thousands being employed by POGOs, along with the social ills that have been not only been debated but actually documented, and that now even Beijing is validating and stressing. What does this do to our calculations as to whether or not this is worth it?
Well, following up with what Ami mentioned earlier, you're right. The Chinese government has been very consistent. In fact, I was looking at their website. Since as early as 2019, they've been reminding our country that online gambling is illegal under Chinese laws. In fact, we did our own research that in Chinese laws, betting, participating in online betting and online gambling, investing in online gambling, working in online gambling is all illegal. That's why all of these POGO companies are here in the Philippines, because they cannot operate in China. But in their laws, if you invest in a POGO business, that's considered illegal. So when you go back to China, there's a big possibility that you'll be prosecuted there. Now, going to your question, Robbie, the POGO pre-pandemic and POGO now is vastly different. The reason why the past administration and also Congress as a whole passed the POGO taxation law is because at that time, POGO was earning a lot of revenues for our country. In fact, NEDA said that it's close to about 100 billion in terms of direct and indirect contribution to our economy. But after the pandemic, a lot of things changed, and the contribution of POGO is not as big as pre-pandemic level. They estimated close to about 50 billion at this point. And in terms of direct revenues, it's also not as big anymore. And the reason for that is two things. Number one, the continued crackdown of the Chinese government, crackdown on POGO workers and also their citizens participating in POGO. And then second is a lot of countries are also becoming more wary about POGO. Cambodia is the latest country who, from our information from the internet, is the latest country who banned POGO and banned online gambling as a whole.
So, Senator, okay, so how big a threat is that we're Chinese tourists are going to be blacklisted, considering the huge numbers that you just quoted. No? And even if you say that post-pandemic it's 6 to 7 billion, the fact that in 2016 and pre-pandemic they brought as much as 200, 300, I believe 600 in another article that I read, no, a billion. And that's nothing to sneeze at, right? And if we continue, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, I'm not a gambler by any measure, okay? But we stand to lose not just, the huge benefits we get directly, but also the fact that so many of our citizens are employed in these POGOs. They're earning 80,000, I understand, to 130,000 a month, which is, again, nothing to sneeze at. So, parang, how big a threat is the fact that Chinese tourists will be blacklisted, considering that we're talking about a 2 million, number there. Diba? Kumbaga, if you match that up against each other, kitang-kita yung financial benefit.
Luchi, Chinese tourists is a huge chunk of our overall tourism. It's about close to about 20% of our overall tourism. At the peak, we're getting about 8 million tourists, and then Chinese tourists about 1.7 to 1.8 million. We ran some figures this afternoon. It contributes about 140 billion in terms of tourism revenue to our tourism industry. So that's a big chunk. About 20% of our total tourism revenues comes from China. So if they decide to stop Chinese tourists from going to the Philippines, because there's a possibility that these Chinese tourists will gamble in the POGOs or will work in POGOs or will invest in POGOs, then that will be a very big loss for our country in terms of tourism arrivals and in terms of tourism revenues. Yeah. One thing for sure that I personally learned from this industry throughout the hearings is that the POGO industry is an unstable industry because of policy changes from China, because of association to crimes and to organized crimes. And most importantly, the Chinese government is intensifying their crackdown on their own Chinese citizens. So, in other words, we don't control the pace of POGO, and it cannot be relied on as a business. Yeah. We want to lure, or we want to attract businesses that are stable, that are sustainable, and generates a lot of jobs.
Yeah, certainly. But how do we compensate for the potential loss if we do decide to close down POGOs?
Okay, there are two things that we need to address. Number one is employment. Right now, as we speak, at the most, there are about 23,000 Filipinos who are employed in the POGO sector right now. A lot of them are technical in terms of skills, meaning they work in IT, they work in customer service, they have technical skills. And I'm very optimistic that the BPO industry can absorb these 23,000 people. And if there's some goodness that came out of POGO, is that they are trained, they got trained with technical skills and skills that they can use in other businesses. Number two is the direct and indirect revenues that our government is earning. Our own estimates that about 33 billion or 1% of our GDP. It's not big, but it's also not small. It's a sizable amount. And my personal take on that is if we take care and cultivate the IT BPO industry in our country, who's growing at about 8% per annum, that's a very good replacement, because we also have to look out for the 1 million square meters of space that will be vacated by the POGO industry. And only the IT BPO industry can take over that 1 million square meter of space.
Senator, other than the instability and the policy environment that you talked about, what does it say, or what might it say about our country if we continue to host what essentially is an illegal activity that has been, explicitly stated by another country? We are, di ba, I mean, there's no other way to put it. They said, bawal sa amin yan, and tayo sinabi natin, o dito kayo, di ba? Tapos, ibato nyo yung service dyan sa ano. What's the reputational risk for our country?
Well, definitely, that's another angle. But the most important for me, the bigger reputational risk is crime. You have organized crime floating around in our country. In fact, I was shocked earlier when the police mentioned that there was a video that was going around. I don't know if you've seen it. This really gruesome video that some Chinese citizens were stabbing someone. And I really thought it was not in the Philippines, because it was really gruesome and terrifying. But the police confirmed that those elements are here. That crime happened here in the Philippines, and those elements are here in the Philippines. And it's really, I think that fear among our citizens and potential investors will prevail if we don't do anything drastic.
Speaking of employment and businesses, yung tourism industry organizations also spoke out today. They're expressing concern about this blacklist nga, and they're worried about their people, tourism, the main and the downstream industries, dahil number 5 daw ang mga Chinese tourists sa arrivals natin. So ano kayang what reassurance can you give them na their concerns will also be addressed with this controversy?
Well, I mean, this is the decision-making point. You have tourism, which is a sustainable global industry, and China it's just a stone's throw away. We're an hour and a half away from Hong Kong, 3 hours and a half away from Beijing. That's a huge market with 1.2 billion in population. And you have POGO. And it seems to me that China is now exerting pressure on those countries who harbor online gambling and POGO in their own jurisdiction. I understand, again, from the internet, that we're not the only ones that was put in the blacklist. I understand that Cambodia and Myanmar were also placed in that blacklist. So we can see that China is now exerting a lot of pressure on their own citizens and also on countries that harbor online gambling and attract their citizens to participate in online gambling.
Senator, should it come to that decision for us to ban offshore gaming, particularly directing to the Chinese market, what about our technical capabilities? Are we confident that we can completely shut off all those operations? And you talked about all of the POGO workers that are now trained, that now have the technical capacity. We may not want to think about it, but the reality is we may have already seeded a potential black market operation in POGOs. Should it come to that decision, can we completely shut it off?
Well, definitely that will be the next challenge, to make sure that they won't go underground. But right now, Robbie, they're going underground as we speak. Apparently, according to our police, they're finding out right now, because this underground POGOs are not registered with PAGCOR. They operate behind the shadows. And only the policemen can detect them because they're the ones operating on the streets. And as we speak, they're already operating via underground. And the bad thing is, because the police don't, this is also another structural problem that we have. The police and PAGCOR don't share information. It's very difficult for the police to find out if this POGO operator is legitimate or not. They'll only find out after cases have been filed or after verification with PAGCOR.
What are the barriers to the PAGCOR and the police sharing information?
To be honest about it, that's my question earlier. It's embedded in the law that an inter-agency task force should be convened. This is composed of the BIR, PAGCOR, PNP, and the other agencies. We also find out, because this inter-agency task force was not convened recently, no? And the last one was last June. There were gross undervalue declaration in the ITRs of the POGO. We found out that close to about 1.9 billion pesos were not paid to the BIR because they undervalued the gross gaming revenues. Because it's a separate, the POGOs pay the BIR separately and PAGCOR separately. PAGCOR, they pay them accurately because PAGCOR has the third-party auditor. But with BIR, it's self-declaration. And we found that they're not honestly self-declaring their revenues.
Okay. Senator Win Gatchalian, sir, maraming salamat po sa inyo.
Thank you very
sir.
much.
Thank you, sir.
Senator.
And that's it for the chiefs. We hope it was discussed. We'll keep the conversation going. Ako po si Roby Alampay.
I'm Mami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Luchi Cruz-Valdes of News 5.
I'm at Lingao. We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Bye.
All right.
Sabi ko sa,